Hello and welcome back once again to a bit of a dive into what MEIOU Taxes 3.0 is coming out with compared to 2.5. And again, I am joined by Fire Kahuna. How are you doing today?
G'day, good to be here again.
So,
Yeah,
where did we leave off? Other than, there's lots and lots of stuff that's new with MEIOU Taxes 3.0.
yeah, we're talking about how everything was new, and I think the last thing was taxes. So,
Yeah, putting the taxes back into MEIOU Taxes, that's right.
yeah,
So,
well,
what
I
have you
guess.
got for us today then? What should we look at first?
Well, a good start would be, I guess, last we sort of focused on the newer features, so it might be good to go over what's changed from 2.5 the most with the existing systems that was introduced by 2.0. Probably population first.
Yeah, 2.0 was the 2.5 was the heresy update. 2.0
Ah,
was
yes.
the one that brought in population.
Yeah, 2.0 added population as replacing development, while 2.5 brought back development and sent the population underground. 3.0, I guess, does keeps 2.5's use of development as being at the value of a province. In 3.0, it's a lot more simple. It's just wealth, basically. Development is wealth. If there's a lot of wealth in the province, you get a very high development value. And it's raw wealth, so not relative or anything like that. Still divided into rural, urban, and elites as
All
before.
right. So this is still what is calculated when you're talking about war score and piecing out four provinces. It's still based on development. So it's basically you're fighting over the wealth. You're trying to take the wealth of the province when you're
Yeah,
calculating like how much it's going to cost you.
yeah. Development's very fundamental to every single system in EF4. So if you start messing with how it's based, and like in 2.0, we had it based on population, you get all sorts of wacky problems in China and India where population is very high, and the wealth is still generally high, but maybe not relatively as high as some certain provinces like Venice or etc.
I mean, we've got Paris here at 52. London not so developed in 1356. I assume that'll change very, very rapidly throughout the game.
Yes.
34.
Especially because in 1356, the way we've modeled it is that London and England is beginning to commercialize, which is to shift the. It's basically the representing the commercial revolution, where the very meaning of wealth and of how wealth would be gained shifted from the sort of Roman and traditional model of land is wealth towards the idea of basically creating wealth, of improving your land for the sake of wealth. So a lot of the smaller cities, and London included, is starting to move their uh, development, I guess, and their where wealth is generally accumulated in society towards things like trade, capitalism, and just growth.
All right, so it's basically yes, it's a part of your. You can sort of see your population in it, but it's mostly about how concentrated the money is. So if there's lots and lots of population but not so much money, then your development won't be as high then as if you had a smaller development but relatively absolutely loaded with money.
Yes, that's often the reason why urban cities can skyrocket development is simply because urban cities have things like commerce and industry, which isn't capped by things just like land size, so it can just grow without the same limitations as the countryside.
Lovely. So that is slightly different to the way that it works in 2.5, and we've got population here as well. And there's new types of populations as well, I can see.
Yes, one of the big promises initially of 3.0 was a class system where we had serfs, peasants, residents, artisans, but we figured out taking them apart and splitting them into smaller groups doesn't really work as well as we thought, because things like population growth doesn't work with smaller groups versus a more cohesive group. So we sort of recombined them back. But the main difference is we've added three new classes, which is the nobles, burghers, and clergy. Also nomads in areas like the steppe. Uh,
Right.
which is mainly for large manpower, but smaller, say, economic wealth, and they have their own industry. But aside from that, nobles, burghers, and clergy are the big change, and the biggest change overall in the system is two things. One, the old local wealth pool that was just like a a pile of money that just built is gone. Instead, every single class has a wealth pool, which is the basis for everything they do. Everything they buy, spend, invest, tax from, all comes from that wealth pool. And that wealth pool is used for not just infrastructure, but the main thing is demand. They demand goods, and they spend money to get those goods, which is the new life, comfort, and luxury section you can see there. It's a concept called fulfillment. So they'll buy goods, and if they can fulfill their demands, they'll just buy more. And so those tallies may be at, say, 14%, but 100% can become relatively lower, and that'll just keep climbing and climbing as they demand more and more as they get more wealth. So you can see the elites generally have pretty good fulfillment because they've got the wealth, while peasantry can often suffer, especially in the wake of the Black Death in Europe. They're not doing so hot.
Yeah, Black Death is something that was something that caught a lot of people out in earlier versions of MEIOU Taxes. Obviously, the Black Death has only just kind of ended. So there is, I guess, do you show province trauma very well? Yeah, you definitely do. Province trauma, like, of a lot of the world is quite high because of the Black Death has just kind of ended, and I guess it's still sort of there at the same time. So a lot of the world in Europe, especially, was they had cities, but these cities weren't very well populated. I think Provence is a pretty good example of that. Whereas, like, it had some urban infrastructure in previous versions, but very, very depopulated. So it was a very easy to, like, springboard and get back up to really high population numbers relative to where you started at.
Yeah, that's one of the big changes 3.0 in the start is actually we have all that starting devastation, which means you actually have decreased economic output for a time, because devastation is trauma in that sense. It reduces the output of all the industries, and it'll take some time to get rid of that, which means it'll take some time to produce more goods and get life fulfillment back up. So that's in there. It's also calculated based on what we know of generally which of regions were affected more than others. So it's not equal across Europe.
Yeah, Poland being the prime example of where it's wasn't hit as hard. I think. I don't think it's fair to say it wasn't hit at all, as some people like to claim.
Yeah,
I think it just wasn't hit as hard.
Yeah, it's very murky on exactly the extent of it, but the general consensus is it was low.
Yeah. All right, lovely. So I guess we can talk a little bit about something you've called executive authority. What's that?
Yeah. So this is a major change from, honestly, the way EU4 works is that in EU4, your mana comes from your ruler. If you have a bad ruler, you have poor mana output. And the biggest problem is if we want to use mana, you have to shift away from that model of those political resources just coming from the king. Historically, the king wasn't the state. Even an amazing ruler sometimes couldn't do anything because of the way the country was. It didn't invest power in the king. It invested power in councils, parliaments, or estates, or even just the advisors and the people of government. Or it's just not centralized, so the king cannot exert their influence. So what we've added is a mechanic called executive authority, which basically says how impactful is the ruler and how much institutional support does he have, either constraining him if he's very skilled or supporting him if he's very weak. There's a modifier in the country UI. It's one of the poorly localized style ones at the moment, but it's
there we go. There. Found it immediately. So great.
Yeah, so you can see here you have the King Edward's native skill, and then you have two main stats, which is ruler authority and institutional authority. It's not exactly equal to 100, and the calculation is still being worked on constantly. But the general concept is if you have high ruler authority, the ruler's stats will be directly translated into their actual final value. While if you have higher institutional authority, a 666 may be pulled down to, say, a 555, while a 000 ruler might be pulled up, say, 1 or 2 points, depending on how much institutional authority you've invested. So you can either focus more on empowering the ruler and basically having a state where you have great highs but really poor lows, which means also low taxation and, of course, low tech and ideas and all that. Or you can have a system that doesn't allow you to have those extreme golden ages, maybe based on the ruler, but instead have a more normalized flow where it doesn't really drop down as low.
All right, that will definitely be something to look into. Like, I know myself, I generally kind of have terrible luck when it comes to rulers, so having high institutional authority might be, fairly good for me, so I won't have to suffer through the awful lows that I generally do tend to suffer through. So Edward III here is a 446, but because institutional authority is relatively high, I guess, we're getting pulled up to 445, or getting pulled down, I guess that is.
Yeah. So in some of these cases where it's more closer to the middle, the 333, it's not as extreme a difference, but when it's 666 or 000, that's where you see the major shifts, basically.
Let's see someone else. So 453 is getting changed into a 462. So I guess it's going up and down.
Yeah, sort of normalizing the stats, basically, so you get a more consistent output across all three of them. And the other key thing there is the power void. So you don't want a poor ruler because in the absence of authority from the state, anyone's going to try to use whatever influence and power they have to benefit themselves and put themselves in charge, which is state corruption, which will flow down to the provinces where we have local corruption, and it's a whole ring of bad effects.
Yeah, corruption's generally not a good thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So you said every province has its own corruption as well?
Yeah, that's probably a good segue into elites. Still deciding on the modifier icon there, but there's a book icon on the left, and that's where you can view the elites of the province. So another big change from 2.5 and 2.0, we used to have estates which were all national, which means all the wealth got sucked up and sent to a national pool. And if you killed that country, that pool disappeared into nothing, their values into nothing, and the provinces would just adopt whatever, I guess, your system of government was. But in this, the elites are actually all provincial. There is no country level data. It's just a composite or a summary of all the provinces' individual values. So the elites have local power, and as we said before, local wealth pools, which directly feeds into the system. So there's no separate wealth pool for an estate. They have loyalty, just like 2.5, and based on those loyalties and power levels, they'll be able to do different things, tax different people at different rates, provide levies at different amounts of capacity, and use their power, if they're not loyal, to corrupt the state, which is provincial corruption there, which is largely a combination of state corruption that's trickled down and corruption generated by disloyal estates in the province, or elites, as we call them now.
So estates or elites are annoying, and you want to have them have as little power as possible. So much has changed in that particular regard.
Yeah. But in that sense, it's a bit harder, I guess, now to just get rid of them, in a sense, because they often provide some of your fundamental duties. If you don't have, see the value there, state reach, which is what enables you to have like administration, bureaucracy, and thus taxation. If you don't have that, you don't really have an option of getting rid of the elites. You wouldn't have the tax base to fund infrastructure, for example, so all that would decay. You wouldn't have armies, which means your levies would decay, and basically you'd have no real support for the realm, because they also provide legitimacy. So if you get rid of the elites without having an alternative, you may have problems with your state. So you sort of have to build an alternative to the elites before you can get rid of them.
That is very, very different then, because in 2.5, my main goal when it came to the estates was remove their privileges, try and remove all of the most of the privileges from them.
Yeah.
They were generally bad things. Maybe there was a couple of burger privileges that were okay to have, but generally it was, I want to get rid of them because while sure I can get quite a lot of bonuses from them, while you're at war you get the estates to give you troops, or in the case of the burgers give you money, the negatives sort of outweighed that in my eyes. And I guess now if you get rid of them, then you're not going to get money from your provinces or men from your provinces, because unless you're sort of micromanaging and the king is down there in Kranjska, actually, you joined the army and you give me money, then that seems like a bit of something that you want to delegate out to others, and I guess the elites can take that role on.
Yeah, it's a strong difference between a feudal realm and a more early modern realm, and that's key to the whole goal of 3.0, is to represent that, as we call it, path to modernity, which is the path towards away from an elite-based society, which is a extractive society, towards a sort of more commoner and free society where wealth isn't really extracted but built. And generally, our core philosophy is that we believe that the commoners are better for the economy because they reinvest their wealth in the things that matter. Burghers are similar in that regard because they're sort of self-made. For the most part, they can inherit wealth, but they're often more self-made. While, say, a noble, in the wrong context, can be basically a parasite on the economy. So
nothing has changed then.
Yeah, that's the thing. We've still got the privileges from 2.5 in the terms of having privileges, but we've completely rewritten it, of course, with a new system. Very similar, you go down in tiers. But the way we've sort of split that with the new rights system is that while rights are the laws of your country, privileges are the corruption of those laws. So often you can't advance in rights without having first taken away some privileges. While privileges can be great for winning back loyalty, they are generally a corruption, and that's how you get the sort of horrible forms of the elites where they've just turned their power into a blind eye, no oversight, and as much extraction as possible.
So how would I go about removing some of those privileges and the corruption of laws?
So at the moment, in the estate UI from 2.5, we've redone the noble privileges, the burgher and clergy. Got a good list. We just got to write localization, all that for them. They won't show until the first due to a current bug, I guess, with the system.
Alright, let's go one day then. See if that'll all pop up for us.
Yeah, it's due to the way the game loads the estates. It's like, until we've loaded our sim, they won't load the estates, but it won't update until the next month. So the sim loads after it's already tested for them. It's like catch-22.
Right. Also, I guess a little bit of complaining from the nobles there. I don't know if people heard.
Yeah.
Right.
On the first, it's like loading a lot of stuff from the sim left over.
But this won't be like this every single year.
No, not at all.
I definitely have noticed myself that 3.0 is... I think it is faster than 2.5. But if you weren't able to run 2.5 at all, I guess it's probably going to not change too much.
Yeah, like the day-to-day is still similar, but we've got much more heavy spikes in January. We're still deciding how to distribute those spikes on maybe one day only or over the course of the month, we're not sure. But generally, we run our systems in Jan, and then the rest of the year just runs pretty smoothly.
Right. So, for the nobles, let's see about their privileges. Revoke privileges from the nobles. That's a button I've clicked many times.
Yeah, so, fancy lock, but we've got a whole new system here. So, you've got your core. It might be good actually to go to the book. There's just like there was reviewing the rights, there's also reviewing the privileges. A similar book.
That's
in the noble estate.
In the noble estate. Okay. Can I open both of them at the same time? Ah, there.
Probably so. Yeah. So we've got a number of different privilege types. They each have a tier, and within them they have a bunch of levels. You can drop a level if you meet pretty loose requirements because they're generally meant to be, they're not really fundamental in terms of why they're there. So you have a lot of leeway into just, I want to remove this, but removing them hurts more than it does to give them. So, you might gain 30 loyalty giving them and might lose 50, 60 taking it away. So, it's a risky thing to give them away. Once they're there, they sort of don't want to lose them.
Right, of course.
But yeah, for the nobles, it's largely a blind eye that they're after, and a bit more ability to use their influence against the people in their estates. So some of the privileges might increase the mana cost of their taxes. Some of them might, say, give them a new tax that they can leverage on the peasants, like the processing monopolies and stuff like that. And some of them might help your state in some regards, but in exchange for, say, more corruption or more influence in the faction system.
It's no surprise that when you hear about, you're reading history or watching YouTube videos about history, and a new king comes in, and much of the start of his reign is all about, trying to work with the nobles or trying to curtail the nobles to make them manageable. It seems like you've got a system here that sort of definitely gives you a hint of just how important the nobles are, and trying to
they're
either
not.
get rid of them or work with them.
That's the thing. They're the base of the countryside, and you can't just flip them to burgers like you can in 2.5. You have to have a real alternative, which is a free peasantry and the ability to actually then tax those peasantry and fund the things that the nobles previously just did on their own.
So how would you go about freeing your peasantry then?
So there's two main ways. There's the rights, which is basically repealing the amount of legal authority they have over the countryside, turning them away from systems like in France where you could have vassals of vassals and moving it towards just a straight nobility or maybe an aristocracy or a gentry, so lower forms of nobility, or just taking away privileges which are the excess, like the processing monopoly where they can just tax mills. If you use my mill, you got to pay a tax. So that's a pretty dog one, while not as hard to remove.
Right. And it's going to cost you mana and loyalty and relationship between yourself and the aristocrats. But it looks like the peasantry gains some welfare, which I guess
because they understand what you're doing for them.
That's the life, comfort, luxury one?
That would be the fist modifier on the left.
There it is.
Orange glowing one. Yep, so this is the basis of the new Unrest System. You have things they're concerned about, which is like hierarchy, consultation, and spirituality, and then how they're treated. So if they're concerned about something and you treat it poorly, they're going to get upset, their loyalty will drop. Same with peasantry, they're going to revolt if they feel that welfare isn't being respected.
Okay.
So you might find, for example, serfdom actually boosts welfare because it reduces their ability to, think that they have a right to be respected in a way. So, yeah, it's like an abstract way of saying, it's a way to get a stable society. It'll be a good society, but
yeah, good for some, not for all, I guess.
Yeah, the model of the elites.
Not much has changed there either. Anyway,
yeah,
right. So the path to modernity is basically trying to, shift your way from feudal to more of a modern society, removing privileges, and I guess is there things you can do as well to help out the common folk? Is there any laws you can pass in that regard as well?
Yeah, we're still working on the systems, I guess, that provide the interactions for that. But we've got a core system in play for the on the population modifier, which is Peasant Freedom. Basically, it's a value about how much control they have over their own surplus. When it's low, the elites will just, if it's 0%, most of that surplus just gets taken away and then distributed amongst the state, the elites, and just taken away from them. So they can't spend that on, say, knowledge, or they can't spend that on comfort goods and the consumer economy. So it can be bad for the economy because the peasants can spend a lot more efficiently in mass numbers than a small amount of nobles can. But higher freedom means that they'll hold on to that surplus and spend it. So, there's the rights do change the freedom value there, and some of the privileges intend to, but we've got more work to do in terms of adding interactions that would let you directly say, add 10 freedom for a while, or just sort of help them out in various times of when you need a calm, stable peasant population.
Okay, and freedom there makes me kind of think of is there slavery in the game?
So we do intend to do slavery at in time. We've just had a lot of trouble, I guess, representing that in our system. Mainly the movement of population around the world, the sources of demand for slaves, and the magnitude that happens. It's all. We do plan to do it because it's a very core part of colonization, for better or worse. Definitely worse in terms of humanity. Not gonna.
Naturally,
yeah, it's just hard to.
Got to get that part in there, so people don't misrepresent you. Yeah. Slavery was bad, but it was also important to model in a historical game. Yes.
Yes. So if we're going to do it, we want to do it right, and we don't want to add a half-assed version of it.
Makes total sense. All right, lovely. So I guess we could talk a little bit about colonization and how that's changed then.
Yes. So there's a long-standing thing in M&T where we've had problems with colonizers actually colonizing. Setting up colonies in the Americas and actually really expanding there. But we've got a new system in place designed by one of our team members, Hamley, who has built an expedition system. So basically, colonial range, the vanilla mechanic, has just been yeeted down to like 60, very low. And instead you send out expeditions, which is a event which sends out a bunch of colonists and explorers, to find new land. The options you have are unlocked by technology. So if you have higher technology, diplomatic technology, you can go further and explore further. And if those expeditions are successful, you'll get a base colony from which around you can use the vanilla sending out colonist mechanics to expand from that point.
So to choose your first colony, you're not going to be like, I want to go and colonize. Let's go and find the best place. Or Jamaica. No, that's not Jamaica, is it?
Yeah.
No, yeah. This one's Jamaica down here. But it's good, right? So, Jamaica, it's got high development, and I'm going to just go straight there. That's not the way it works.
No, you send an expedition to the Caribbean, and as a response, if it's successful, you get a colonist there, and then from there you can start, looking at the area and decide where do I want to expand to. But with a low range, it's a bit harder to jump between them.
And get just a little bit of tech there going.
So the main thing you need is colonization ideas. Interestingly enough, it's linked at the moment to commercialization. So that's I also forgot to mention this. We do have a major complete rework of all the institutions with a whole new set. But the big linchpin of the system is commercialization. It's our concept of representing the shifts in mentality of the ideas of profit and the value of investing in your own things to grow them to simply for the sake of having more profit and more wealth. So colonization is locked behind that. So you may have to play a country that has commercialization at the start to get exploration ideas. Spain and Portugal adopt that within 50 years of game time.
That'd be an institution and commercialization. There it is. So it doesn't unlock until 1350. Oh, it's already open.
So actually, they're all unlocked from game start, but the way it works is basically tech costs increase over time. Institutions lower those tech costs. If you realize each one of them has like a negative 100% tech cost, so as time goes on, tech's going to get very expensive without institutions. So we did that basically so you can have any order of invention. And the other thing I mentioned about institutions before moving on is that the way they're invented in 2.5, which is, if not ever, but where one nation invents it and then it spreads from there, that's been replaced with a multiple source invention model where anyone in the world can invent it if they have the conditions for it. So if you hover over the name of meritocracy, you can see the requirements for inventing it. So if Europe adopts the meritocracy rights and has a good ruler that would push that sort of reforms, then meritocracy will invent in that nation. And anyone who has a lower level of rights that can sort of receive it will begin adopting that spread for it. So to have it spread to you, you have to have some sort of base support for it in your society. And to invent it, you have to have the environment basically to create that. So anyone can invent commercialization. That's not Eurocentric. It just means you have to reform society towards a way that would support it.
That is very different to the way that, I guess, reinvention worked in 2.5, which was, I think, best described as black magic fuckery. And I don't think I ever reinvented meritocracy in 2.5 or 2.0, just ever. So difficult.
To be honest, I don't think a single team member could tell you whether it was actually in and whether it was actually working or not.
Very nice. All right, so I guess we can go more into colonization, but that'll have to be in the next video because, yet again, there is an awful lot in MEIOU Taxes 3.0, and we don't have time to cover absolutely everything in one video. Yeah, check back tomorrow, guys, because there's going to be another one all about all of the extra stuff that MEIOU Taxes 3.0's added. And yeah, it is a lot of stuff. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. You can say bye too,
Oh, see ya.